Commission. Today's Friday, July 14th, 2023. The time is 1:30. Mayor, if you could lead us in Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, while we're getting settled, if everybody can take a look at their cell phones, make sure they're on silent vibrate or turned off, please. All righty, sir. You want to kick this off and give us an intro and where we're going?
Sure. There we go. Oops.
There you are.
I think I found it. As all of you know, and perhaps everybody who's here, maybe not everybody who's watching, we have 4 candidates that we have brought here. They were selected by the council after some deliberation, commission. And last night there was a reception where the public could meet the candidates and ask some questions. This morning the commission has had an opportunity one-on-one to meet with each of the candidates and get a sense of who they are and hopefully whether or not they're a good fit with Flagler Beach. This afternoon, again, we have a public meeting where the candidates will come before you one at a time and you'll be able to ask questions of them. The idea is to replicate a kind of a commission meeting setting and so that you'll see how they would react in a commission meeting setting. In terms of the questions you ask, I know you've already asked a lot of the questions you would like them to answer. You may want to ask some other questions. You may want to ask some of the same questions. If a candidate did particularly well on a question, you may want to ask that question again so that everybody can hear it. If somebody did particularly badly on a question, you may want to ask that question as well so that everybody can hear the answer. Usually what happens is the chair would welcome the candidate when he comes in, give them a couple of minutes to kind of tell them about them, tell the audience, and both in person and on the streaming, who they are, and then turn to one end of the dais or the other and just let everybody ask one question and rotate around until you're done. I'll give you a 5-minute warning when we get close to time if you take all the time. As I indicated in some of our paperwork, there's no reason for you to take a full half hour if they've answered all the questions you want them to answer. On the other hand, if you have more questions, you can take longer than a half hour. The interviews are sequential, so we'll just bring the next candidate in when you're done with the prior candidate. So having said that, do you have any questions for me?
Commissioners, any questions or comments before we begin?
Yep.
No, sir.
All right, I'll go get Mr. Barton.
All right, thank you. And while we're waiting, I know probably each of you asked questions that are not on the form, that were not pre-drafted, and it would just be interesting if you found value in your own particular questions to ask them in the group setting, because I'm sure some of y'all asked questions that we did not, so that would be really good to hear. How you doing, sir? Do we want our candidate sitting in the chair?
I set it up for them to sit in the chair.
Yeah, get comfy.
Thank you.
You can let us know how it feels. You know, does the chair feel okay?
I feel hot.
Well said.
The button on the microphone where it says push green, it's hot. Touch it again and turn it off. So.
All right. And if you can, before we get into questions, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what brings you here.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for the opportunity to learn more about your community and have the opportunity to be considered for your next city manager. I was born and raised in Michigan, served in 4 communities in Michigan, following a brief stint as an officer in the U.S. Army during the early 1990s. After serving 4 communities in Michigan, all of which were relatively small towns, one of which the starting community was a coastal town, Lake Huron, Michigan. And then moved to Connecticut, served there for 4.5 years before learning to love Florida and coming down to Fernandina Beach and serving there for 7.5 years. I served there until March of this year. I think I've come to truly enjoy the Florida coastal life. I think that's where my skill set has evolved over the course of the 7.5 years in Fernandina Beach, and I look forward to bringing those same skills to help enhance your quality of life here in Flagler Beach.
And can you tell us a little bit about what you did in Fernandina Beach with all the specifics?
I think the most notable accomplishment was a successful fight with FEMA as Hurricane Matthew destroyed your pier. Hurricane Matthew destroyed the city's marina, downtown marina. After receiving 2 signed certifications from FEMA saying that they would pay 75% of our reconstruction cost, we went forward with that reconstruction at a cost of approximately $10 million. After the construction was nearly completed, FEMA suddenly changed their mind and said, we think you could have repaired it, and we're only going to give you $700,000. So that was a 5-year battle. We actually filed formal arbitration in the United States Civilian Board of Contract Appeals in Washington, D.C., and we put together, with the assistance of counsel in Washington, D.C., we were successful. FEMA conceded before we even went to appeal. So the city did get approximately $7.5 million, and for the first time in history, FEMA actually also paid our financing cost that we had to take out a loan to pay for that. So they gave us an additional $300,000, which FEMA had never been done in the history of FEMA.
All right. Anything else you'd like to tell us before we begin?
Nope, go ahead, fire away.
All right. And I won't do this in any particular order. So commissioners, who'd like to go first? Commissioner Mealy.
All right. Well, this morning, Dale and I talked about Fernandina and similarities and differences to Flagler Beach. I'm sure you all covered that. We talked about Citizens Academy because I saw in his written materials that he was big on Citizens Academy, so we spent some time on that. And if he gets the job, yes, we will continue having a Citizens Academy. So I was interested in that. And citizen surveys, different ways of putting things out to the community, asking their opinions on various issues. We talked about CRAs, what a CRA is and isn't, and how it works, and how everybody benefits or doesn't benefit from CRAs.
Well, while you're on that topic, would it be okay if we interrupt you and ask about his thoughts on the CRA?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's a good topic. So if you can, your thoughts on that conversation and the CRA in general, and then what you see around Flagler Beach, if you could just kind of elaborate on that.
My initial experience with CRAs, although they went by a different name in Michigan, they were called downtown development districts, but they were tax increment financing districts. So I'm familiar with that. Beginning throughout my career, we did have a CRA, and for those listening, Community Redevelopment Agency. We did have one in Fernandina Beach. The one in Fernandina Beach was created in the early 2000s. It did not generate any revenue until 2017 because of the lack of redevelopment and some unique drawing of the boundaries of the CRA. There was a lot of, apparently back in the early 2000s, there was a lot of misconception about a CRA. People were thinking it was going to create a new tax. So a lot of people wanted to opt out of the CRA, not understanding that it wasn't going to be a tax increase on those property owners. So it started to generate revenue. The biggest generator of the revenue was there was a former lumber yard in downtown Fernandina Beach that has now been redeveloped into high-end townhomes. So the CRA is currently generating about $80,000 in revenue a year. So your CRA is actually generating more revenue than the Fernandina Beach CRA. The first major project of the CRA was securing a loan, use the CRA revenues to provide for debt service to reopen a long closed railroad crossing and restore a grid. Fernandina Beach was the last gridded community by the Spanish in the 1800s. So this reopening of this rail crossing will restore that grid to its full extent and improve pedestrian and vehicular circulation in downtown.
All right, what other questions did you have?
We talked about grants, about how we go about getting them, who should monitor them, relationships with state and federal elected officials that are important to have those relationships with, and I got a very positive response on that. I don't know if you want to elaborate further on that.
Yeah, I think that's another good one. So grants and the conversation you had around that, and you had a couple specifics in there.
Yeah, that you need to have a good relationship with the state and federal elected officials, the use of lobbyists, all the people that you need to say, yes, we're going to get those grants, and who's going to monitor them.
Right. So if you can give us your takeaways and elaborate on that conversation that you had.
We had, I had a full-time grant writer in Fernandina Beach. We were successful, and a full-time lobbyist. The lobbyist that represented the city of Fernandina Beach just completed his 52nd year of lobbying service in Tallahassee, so he knows his way around. He's been very successful.
52 years.
52 years.
Did he help build it?
Yeah, well, yeah, you can talk to Buddy about that, but he's a great advocate for the city. Last year, we got the state appropriation for $1 million to design the seawall. This year, we put in for $1 million to build the seawall along the Amelia River. Unlike Flagler Beach, we were not successful in getting that appropriation. It was vetoed by Governor DeSantis. But we secured several grants through State Department of Historic Preservation for rehabilitating iconic downtown and community buildings. We've received smaller grants for police equipment, fire equipment, and those are the predominant grants that we pursued.
And we talked about the importance of knowing what the grant is for ahead of time, you know, not just, oh, there's money out there, let's go get it. You know, they have to have, quote, shovel-ready kind of projects. And though our lobbyist has not been doing it for 52 years, because I think he would have had to have been born lobbying, I did put a shout out for Edgar. So, and then we spent some time about how you communicate, and I think you should re-answer this one too, about how you communicate with staff and elected officials and residents.
Yeah, if you could, just take us through your views on communication in general, with everything from staff to the public to elected officials, if you can.
I truly believe one of my strengths is community engagement. In the past, actually throughout my entire career, I've written a weekly column for online and print publications, and I look forward to doing that wherever I end up next. Staff, I generally have weekly or bi-weekly staff meetings, typically immediately after a city council, city commission meeting, to review what the commission's, what came up at a commission meeting, how do we need to respond as quickly as possible. I enjoy or set aside specific time for each one of you at a time of your choosing. I like to be routine, so second Tuesday of the month, or second Tuesday, or 10 o'clock on Tuesday, we're going to meet for an hour, whatever time's convenient for you to go over that. And then at the end of the week, similar, although not quite as detailed as your department weekly reports, provide what was called Friday notes that went to all the city commissioners, basically a summary of my schedule from the week that just concluded, my schedule for the coming week, and then a quick bullet list of key projects and issues that were ongoing. And that was sent to the city commissioners, the directors, and the local media.
Okay, and if you could elaborate on, I know you mentioned doing community outreach via the media with writing articles and stuff. What about just the public being able to communicate with you? What's your thoughts on that? And what would be your process for it?
I respond to emails, open door policy for both staff and the public, and working forward or working with whatever they want issues addressed.
Okay. What other questions we have?
Okay. That a description of your budgeting process, how you go about developing a budget.
In Fernandina Beach, we typically kick off the budget process with a visioning session with the city commission to get an understanding of where their priorities were. Then we turn it over to the staff, and the staff would incorporate what the direction they got or heard from the city commission. We'd refine those numbers, and then I would typically present my budget to the city commission in second week in July. Then we'd have the following week we'd set the tentative millage rate. Then we'd have budget hearings or budget workshops throughout the month of August before 2 public hearings in the month of September before adopting the budget at the end of September.
Now, Flagler Beach is doing budgeting next Wednesday. Do you have one prepared for us next week?
But I got a week.
Just wanted to check. All right, what else we got?
Okay, we did not talk about this, but you did just mention a little bit. Strategic planning, how do you do that? We didn't get to that.
The commission, they would generally come to consensus on what their direction or plan was. Then the problem always became the execution, because about 3 or 6 months later, typically there'd be other bright, shiny objects that would distract them, or they like to use the word torpedo. So the consensus would usually last about 6 months. And that was a frustration for city staff, that we would spend 6 months addressing or preparing for their visioning session, what they laid out, 100% consensus, and then to have it yanked out, that was a frustration, because I think the strategic visioning, and that's your primary role, is you have to set the vision for the community, and then it's staff's responsibility to implement it. And if it's always a moving target or you're changing the goalposts, it makes it hard to get things done.
Do you want to add anything to that?
I have something I'd like to ask. We have lots of large projects going on in the city, and one of them is the dune renourishment project with the Army Corps of Engineers, and you shared a little bit of some history and relationship that you have with the Army Corps, and I'd like for everyone else here on the dais to hear about that. If you can share that information.
Sure. From what I understand, you also fall under the Jacksonville area office of the United States Corps of Engineers. I built a great relationship with many of the senior managers in the Jacksonville office over the course of rebuilding the marina. We actually had to get special waiver because our marina was actually built too close to the navigation channel, so we had to get, they call the 405 permit, basically our own variance, because the marina was built too close to the channel. And then we have annual or biannual beach renourishment projects that the Corps oversees on the beaches. And our renourishment was done due to the fact of the proximity of the naval base in Kings Bay, Georgia, which houses the ballistic missile submarines. So they have to dredge the channel annually, and we were the benefactor of free sand.
How neat for you.
No fighting on that one, huh?
No, sir.
Do you think you can get some of that sand brought up here?
See what we can do.
And I would like to ask another question, and it's from one of our candid questions here, and I think it would fall for you really great, is what would your previous elected officials say about you?
I think it would depend on which one you ask. I think it would run the gamut. I think you would find some that were highly complimentary to me, and some that felt that perhaps I tended to favor some commissioners more than others. It's always an intriguing challenge to work for 5 or 6 bosses. Right. I've worked with boards as large as 7, but I love it, and I do try to treat each and every one with the respect and courtesy that your office demands.
And that would answer my next question. My next question was, we're all here because we love the city and we want to do the best we can for the citizens, but we have different approaches. And so we're going to bring things to you that are important to us. What's important, like more important to me, but maybe less important to Eric. How do you deal with that?
I have to draw a distinction between commissioner priorities and commission priorities. And that when I might be able to do small things on your behalf individually, but there comes a time when, all right, I've gone as far as I can and I need to get the entirety of the city commission to approve further action on this project or this policy. And I think it was with you, Mr. Cooley, I believe that, yeah, I think one of the challenges is how you develop the respect among your peers is that when you bring a project that you are passionate about that fails to generate the passion with your fellow commissioners or doesn't go the way you want it to, I think it demonstrates your true leadership when you accept the fact that you tried, you had a fair chance, you lost, it's time to move on instead of then trying to undermine your fellow commissioners or city staff.
And if one commissioner asks for some kind of information, data on some, would you then share with
My policy is if you send me an email asking me for information, I will respond to all of you city commissioners at the exact same time with the exact same information.
Good. Okay.
All right.
And
How many more you got?
I have one more, and I think I'll save it for the end. It would be what questions you had to ask of me. I didn't get to ask you that before.
Well, let's get our questions out of the way first.
That's
yeah.
why I said let's.
Commissioner Spradley, you want to use your questions?
First of all, Mr. Martin, thanks for coming down and participating. We appreciate it. For the benefit of the public and for us, we have a city that if you're hired, you're walking into at least 4 independently burning fires that are happening right now. What with the pier demolition and rebuilding, the hotel coming in, the fact that half the city seems to be flooding more times than not, beach renourishment, A1A reconfiguration, and all of that. So a 2-part question. Number one, what is your experience with multitasking these kinds of projects, if not identical, but at least large projects at the same time? And do you have any reservation about coming into a city where that is what you would inherit?
Typically, I keep a large whiteboard in my office that tracks the project status. It's available whenever I meet with you on whatever our scheduled meeting basis is. It's available for you to review and ask questions about. So I have my list. I know some of you have your list that I look forward to keeping track of. I rely heavily on staff. I am a generalist, as most city managers are. I rely on the professionalism and the experience and the training of the department directors. I think I indicated to some of you, I know I'm supposed to know this much about this much. Directors need to know this much about this much. And I think that's what makes a great team. Yeah, I'd have, as I believe I indicated in one of my memos to you as part of the initial process, was there's no spring training for city management. You expect to jump in and pick up where the last city manager left off. So I look forward to those challenges.
Great. And another question, so that the public can hear this as well. One thing that struck me when I looked at your materials for the first time a couple of weeks ago was in your list of accomplishments, right at the top of it was navigating Fernandina Beach through Hurricanes Matthew and Irma. And of course, nothing could strike closer to home than that, particularly those 2 particular hurricanes. So with that lead in, we do have a city that's got substantial, stormwater, wastewater issues that only get worse whenever the storms come. What sort of experience do you have in tackling those kinds of issues with infrastructure?
Shortly after I arrived in Fernandina Beach, we did not have a stormwater program. So we implemented a stormwater fee, which I believe is about $12 per month on city residents' utility bills. and we hired a consultant to develop a stormwater master plan, and we've been implementing that master plan over the course of the last 5 years, tackling what we believe to be the most critical areas first. So that's been a great success with the stormwater. We've been working on lining and rehabilitating our water and sewer lines. We had our own water plant and sewer plant in Fernandina Beach. That community, I keep saying we, that community is going to be struggling, as this community will, with the new state regulations on discharge. You're not going to be allowed to do surface water discharges anymore, so get ready to have a big bill on how you're going to repurpose your effluent from your wastewater plant. And we started to look at, again, for those not quite familiar with it, this is the rest of Florida being saddled with solutions to that are South Florida problems. The water that we discharged in Fernandina Beach into the Amelia River was cleaner than the river water itself. And from what I understand, your water here that you discharge is somewhat similarly clean to the water body that you put it, but because there's problems in South Florida, we're no longer going to be able to do that.
And my last question would be, for a man of your experience and background, you would be an attractive asset for a lot of cities in Florida. So why Flagler Beach?
The word I used a lot with you today was quirky. I think, but that term is meant lovingly. I've really enjoyed learning about coastal Florida and Fernandina Beach, but this is a different type of coastal beach community. I think there's more beach here, more visible, more attractive, more beautiful to this community than Fernandina Beach. So yeah, I think it was fortunate for me that your position came open at the right time for me to make use of my skills and in turn get to enjoy living and working in this type of community.
Great. Thanks,
So,
Mr. Martin.
so are you quirky as well?
I'm sure I would be described that way by some.
All right, Commissioner Bellhumeur.
To keep it short, I've got two questions. What scares you about taking a job in Flagler Beach?
Flagler Beach?
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing. I told the mayor, she asked me the question, what causes stress in you? And I said, absolutely nothing. I was a former military officer. The decisions I could make as a military officer could kill people. The worst we're going to have here is flood, drowning, or fire. And you will be notified the instant I am of any of those instances. But in relation to that, no stress.
Any concerns after reviewing our budget?
No, sir. We just got to figure out how to make the best use of the taxpayers' dollars.
Okay. And one last one. If chosen by the commission today, will you accept the position as city manager?
Absolutely.
And will it be within the salary range we're offering?
Yes, sir.
And when can you start?
Got to give me
Well, yeah, we'll get to that. Probably.
All right, well,
That's almost a job offer. So,
I'll be asking them all the same question, but okay, I'm done.
but you would, if you were given a offer, you would be available to start working for the city at what point?
within a month,
Okay,
at the latest.
just didn't want to make sure. Commissioner Sherman.
Yeah, so Mr. Martin and I had a great conversation. We're both military men. I didn't hold against him that he was in the Army. He was a infantry officer, so that alone right there spoke volumes of his character as a fellow service member. So thank you again for your service. And I guess one of the first questions I asked him was about strategic planning. I think I mentioned to him that I'm a strategic thinker and a kind of visionary of Flagler Beach, and I just wanted to mention. Could you just share again I know the mayor briefly touched on it as well, but could you share how you would go into the first 6 months? And we mentioned that within those first 6 months, maybe before the flip of the calendar year, I would like for us, again, to come together as an elected body to review that strategic plan and ensure that we are staying the course of those goals and such. Would you mind sharing your views?
Sure. Mr. Abels provided all of us candidates with a copy of your your last strategic vision plan, which was dated April, I believe, of last year, April of '22. So I think it would be critical for your next city manager to sit down and revisit those and make sure that those are still the priorities that you want to pursue, and in that order. I think that'd be a great reason to have a revisit of those priorities, because you have a new city manager, and that's going to be the next city manager's task, is to move those visions forward.
And I just had one other question. You know, what do you see as, you know, we kind of talked about it again, but I'd like for the public and the others on the dais here, what do you think is the biggest challenge here in Flagler Beach?
What resonated pretty much universally among you and our private conversations and the citizens last night was stormwater and maintaining the character and quality of life that you have here in Flagler Beach.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor,
I already went.
that was all you had?
Yeah.
So, you got asked, what are the largest challenges you see for Flagler Beach? But I want to twist that question a little bit. As you went around and looked at everything with the city, and you look at the dynamics and in our paperwork and everything, what do you see as what's going to be the largest challenge for you? And not a task-wise, but what's going to keep you up at night as far as what you see? Because a lot of times you'll look around the city and you'll see, okay, this is easy, and that won't be easy. And what are those things that you have observed?
I think what plagues a lot of the smaller cities is long-term maintenance of facilities and equipment. You got a great staff here that seems to be doing a good job of keeping things together and operating. And they seem to take great pride in what they do and that the service. And sometimes the citizens don't see or recognize the passion and dedication of the staff because they work behind the scenes. But I think, yeah, that was notable. That I think, you know, you look at the wastewater treatment plant. I know that you're in the process of building a new one. Some of the maintenance buildings and equipment. I think you have an incredible library. But I think those are the challenge, that because it's easy to. I used to keep a dented can on my desk because of the can we kept kicking down the road.
Yeah.
And it started as a small soup can, and then it went to what we commonly refer to as a number 10 can, which got bigger. And there were times when I threatened the city commission that I'm going to bring the 55-gallon drum to the city commission meeting because we keep kicking the can down the road. And that takes leadership to say, yep, we need to address those, because those are things that the long-term costs of infrastructure only increase if you defer the maintenance.
Which brings me to another interesting question. So costs keep going up. However, you know, and it's expected that expenses are going to go up, property values go up, and, you know, things go up. But there comes a point where mill rate cannot go up anymore. And how do you, in a small city, balance not having large increases when you, in a lot of cases, have a lot of large expenses that are going up? How do you balance that?
I think that comes through the prioritization that you put down, or that you establish for the city manager and the staff to implement. And you have to find creative ways of generating new revenue, whether it's through fees or things like that. But at the same time, I think you need to be aware of the impact on the single parent or the elderly resident and what the impact of those are. I think there are mechanisms in place that the state, with the Save Our Homes, that try to keep a cap on the property taxes. But we need to be aware of the impact of those and still strive to provide and demonstrate to the community that these projects are worth doing, and they will improve your quality of life. As I indicated to some of you, you have your vision and goal statement mounted on the wall, and everything we do, you should be able to point to one or two of the things of those vision and goals and say, is what we're doing addressing one or two of those vision statements? And if it's not, then we need to move on.
Okay, and the other question I had is, so you've had a lot of successes that you cited. You had the fight with FEMA, and you have a very good working relationship with Corps of Engineers and stuff like that. By the way, is FEMA mad at you now? Because we don't want FEMA to be mad.
Right. No, I think they change personnel faster than communities change city managers.
But some of these successes you've had in other places, if you can name some of those, because you had those two you cited, but what are some other things that you've had successes for in the past that you'll be able to bring to our city that you see could be of benefit?
I think the community engagement, I think I enjoy writing, so I look forward to writing and sharing information with you and the community as a whole. I think staff development, I think I would list as my second strength behind community engagement. I was able to develop a great staff in Fernandina Beach and keep them. I inherited a very senior staff in Fernandina Beach and basically turned over through retirement for the most part, every senior director in the city. We had a great team and I enjoyed working with them. So I think I can bring staff development, staff recruitment, staff development, and pick up where we need to pick up because I know you have a very senior staff here, and we'll have to work on transition planning and things like that.
Okay. Commissioners and Mayor, any follow-up questions based off the conversation you're hearing?
Just do you have anything you want to ask us?
Actually, it didn't come to my mind until I was speaking with Commissioner Spradley, but I'd be curious to hear from each one of you. What do you think the landmines are that are waiting for me?
We don't have enough time.
I can go first. Us. The biggest challenge, and you talked about, is you have 6 people that, number one, you have to get to agree on something, and then be able to prioritize and get that moving forward. And then this particular municipality has elections every single year. 2 seats up here change every year, which means direction changes. And that was a pain point, for a previous municipality. And I think that will continue to be a pain point. So that would be a potential landmine, because every election, potentially, if you have seat changes, you have vision changes too. And that dynamic, that can vary wildly depending on, who ends up coming in. And Commissioners and Mayor, I don't know if you have any other thoughts on.
Just that there are so many projects. And, some small ones, what they call the low-hanging fruit that can be done fairly easily. Some that are going on forever. The Army Corps project goes back to like 2001. I always say that the guy at FEMA at the Army Corps that we've been dealing with is named Jason Hara. And I always say I watched him grow up because they've been doing their project for so long. And the hotel and the pier and the whatever. So prioritizing, I think, is, if we can't prioritize, because there are 6 of us, that you be able to do so.
Well, and to piggyback off what you're saying, that was a pain point previously, in calendar years. So when you have 30 very, very important projects, the question came up long ago in previous city meetings, how do you come up with a top 10 out of that? And the consensus up here was you can't, because they're all important. None of them can come off the radar, and they're all just as important as the other. And so if you have 30 high priority projects and another 40 that are almost as important, how do you balance that yourself?
You ever see the circus performer with the guy with the spinning plates? That's my job. Keep the plates from falling.
Right.
So some might need a little more babysitting at a certain time, and you got to step away and go back and spin the plate a little bit more. But that's the greatest analogy I can come up with.
Multitasking.
So potentially we could have a city manager that is a plate spinner. Other questions, follow-up thoughts? Did that answer your questions? Did you have any others?
Thanks. No, that's fine.
I might throw an additional note in there. Communication and transparency with the public. and making sure that they get a little bang for their buck, because at times it seems like we're paying more attention to people coming over the bridge than the people that are already here. So that's a challenge that would make the people happy if we could keep up with it.
I know one person coming over the
I
bridge you
know,
better pay
Jane, I
attention to.
You know what I meant.
Yes.
I look forward to serving you and the residents of this city, first and foremost.
Commissioner Spradley?
Yeah, one last thought from me, and I was glad to hear something a few minutes ago, but I have been told, both from the 10 or so years I've been on that side of dais and now the 3 months I've been on this side, about how the most valuable asset in the city of Flagler Beach, meaning the government side of it, is its people, is the staff here. I think we're 106 employees right now, something like that. And so I got to see a view of that before I became elected. Now I see it much more, and I find all that to be true. And especially our department heads seem to be second to none across the board. And so I just wanted to comment that I like what you said, that you have great reliance upon staff. And I think that that's so important to get the mileage out of them and get their respect. So I was happy to hear that. So appreciate it.
Any success that I have will be directly attributable to staff that work with me.
Great. Thank you.
All right, we're beginning to get close on time. So on behalf of this body and the city, I want to thank you for taking time out and coming all the way here, and amongst your many interviews that you have, and speaking with us and giving us your undivided.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for consideration. I look forward to working with you.
All right, appreciate it. So how did the seat feel? Was it okay?
A little warm. Not quite as hot.
All right, just so everybody knows, we have Mr. Gleason coming in next. Yep, no problem.
I do the rest of my staff interviews here.
Do you want us to sit in on them?
No,
You can ask
maybe,
questions.
on second thought, maybe not.
We're doing okay on time, plus we have a break built in here if we need to work
Yeah.
through that as well.
I was going to tell Scott he could interview somebody from 2:45 till,
I'm working the
Appreciate
clock.
that.
and from 3:55 till 4.
That's right. That's all I need for a couple of ones.
Doesn't take you that long to say no?
No.
You all have a preference?
Oh, you can sit down here?
Got your nameplate and-
We got you ready to go.
Okay, and that way my back's not to the audience then too.
Yep, and if you were to get the position, that's where you would be sitting.
I saw that Wednesday night. At least there's a buffer, the attorneys between me and you, all right?
That's probably strategic that way.
Actually, I've worked with Drew in his firm
Okay,
for a number of years. They were our city attorney over in Mascot.
got it. All right, well, if you can, sir, please take us, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, and then how it evolved that you've come to Flagler Beach.
Well, as you all know, unlike the folks here in the room, they have big packets and books on us, so they know about as much about us as anybody. But my name is I'm James Gleason, but I go by Jim. Bio might say I'm coming from Littleton, New Hampshire. I'm actually from Orlando. Moved to Florida in 1965. My dad was U.S. Air Force. And McCoy Air Force Base was in Orlando. Just to tie in, a lot of people don't know why their tag says MCO. and that's where that comes from, McCoy Air Force Base. So that tie, and we also had a Naval Training Center in Orlando and Martin Marietta, Lockheed Martin Defense. So it was the defense industry was Orlando until Disney came, and that created that change. Most of my career has been in Florida, and 2 stints in Georgia, and then in 2007 to 2008, I did 1 year in Iraq for the United States Department, for the U.S. State Department. It was under the surge with President Bush, where they brought city managers and folks from non-military to be part of provincial reconstruction teams, and they put us out into the various provinces or states in Iraq. I was one of the first 3 city managers that was taken over by the State Department, and my job was to train the Iraqis in decentralized self-government and budgeting. You can see we did a good job. Needless to say, that time was done. I came back. My wife and I were in Georgia, and she's a public school teacher here in Florida and wanted to return to her roots. Well, she's actually from New York, but Florida. So she teaches for Orange County Public Schools and worked for 10 years in Lake County at the city of Mascot. When I left there in 2020, I took an opportunity in a place I'd never been and had never seen, and I didn't know anybody, and that was Littleton, New Hampshire. So a Florida guy went to the mountains up in New Hampshire. It's a beautiful place, but it's also a place that gets cold and has quite a bit of snow. And for a Florida guy, I have learned to snow ski the last few years and taken some advantage of hiking. And hiking in New Hampshire is different than hiking on a trail here in Florida, where it's flat and you can go for 8 miles. Try to go up a mountain 8 miles, and there's a big difference in terms of that. Why am I here? Well, 2 things. First of all, you all did select the candidates to come here, and I want to thank you for that opportunity. I don't believe that would be here if it didn't have a certain skill set in reference to manager-wise. Second is that I am a Floridian, and while I may be from Orlando, I have spent many a summer vacationing over here in South Flagler and Ormond by the Sea in particular. My wife and I would rent a house from a gentleman who had a vacation home just about 2 miles south from here, from probably 2010 to 2017. And if you're going to go out to eat, where are you going to go? You're coming up here to Flagler Beach, and you're going to spend your time here in this community. I have a granddaughter who's 13 now that she was disappointed when she was here a few weeks ago, couldn't go out on the pier. She remembers that experience. And I have 2 smaller grandchildren, 5 and 7, and I found out that week that I was one of the finalists, and I said, you know, if Grandpa gets this job, I'm going to make sure this pier's open. So the next time you come over, you can go out and have the same experience that your sister did in terms of that process. So I didn't apply to 20 cities in Florida. I applied to this city. Location, location, location. Those of you in real estate, in terms of there. You're not Daytona, you're not Ormond, you're not New Smyrna. It is distinct, and it's a hidden treasure that everybody has discovered. But I know the goal is you want to keep it what it is, but you still want those dollars to come here, and you want them to leave a smaller footprint, but leave as much money as they can here in your community. And I believe that this would be a wonderful place to finalize the topping of a career in this business. Not a retirement job, but a destination in terms of as a community. I knew from your meeting Wednesday night, anybody who thinks this is a retirement job, they're applying for the wrong place, okay? It was very, very clear.
So what you're saying is we're high maintenance.
Let's say you have a lot going on. So that has brought us to this point, and you have 4 candidates today. We wouldn't be here if we all didn't have certain skills in budgeting and the mechanics and the day-to-day. You know, what's really important is that you need to find a person that's the fit for you and your employees and these folks in terms of a community. You know, any community that goes through a change in a manager, you know, you can look back at what went right or what went wrong. but nothing is more challenging to a community, you know, especially if things don't end on a positive, in reference to that uncertainty that it has on employees and even a board that has their vision and their plans. It's almost like you've got to stop and start and hope that somebody picks up and is able to get moving and moving quickly in terms of that process. I can do that. I went to Littleton, New Hampshire, as I told you. I didn't know New England. I didn't know a soul there. I'd never lived there. I walked into the office and there were 19 projects laying on a desk. And have at it, Jim. There wasn't anybody there to sit down and say, this is what you need to do. There were 2 financial audits that hadn't been done on the community, and we're into a 3rd budget. They didn't even know what money they had in reference to that process. You ask them today, those 19 projects are cleared. Now, there's another list. It doesn't stop. But I inherited things like a dysfunctional wastewater treatment plant, so I understand what you're going through in terms of the demands and the need for the rebuilding of your wastewater treatment plant. A1A may be fixed, but you can already see that there's some drainage issues and some other problems that are going on there that'll probably be a constant. You've got your beach renourishment, in addition to not only your crossovers, but your dunes and fencing and all of that needs to get back. I think, there's 17 crossovers that maybe still aren't fixed. You've got stormwater. You know, we're getting storms on a more frequency and a higher intensity, and that's exposed a lot of flaws in a lot of our communities, you know, here in the state. And I know you have a stormwater fee and a fund, but and a study I looked at was dated, I think, 2002. So at least some basis. And so the idea would be get a handle on how much of that has been done, and then what's the next phases that need to take place, you know, from there. So that's just the short-term projects and issues that you've got. And I also believe that you have a staff, based on the interaction I've had the last couple of days. The word family comes up a lot on how they feel about each other. And that's an asset. When you've got people that care that much about each other and where they live, and they deserve to have a manager that recognizes that and recognizes their strengths and their abilities, but also holds them accountable for what you want is your vision. And you also are owed transparency and communication from a manager who will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. We'll give you the facts. We'll be honest. If there's a problem, we'll talk about it. We'll work on how to get there. When you have a priority list, okay, we'll work through that list. If some things come up, we'll talk about that. If citizens have concerns, they want to know there's a manager that has an open door, an open phone, and an open email, and is going to respond to their concerns. And then we'll let you all know what those concerns were, so when they run into you out on the street and they say something to you, you can say, yes, I knew that. Manager told me that was going on. So I think I bring a lot to the table in the sense of I'm not intimidated by what you have on the list. I'm familiar with Florida. I know some of the challenges that are there. And I also know, in living, even though it was Orlando, you know, growth is still a concern for folks. You know, people move further out, and then the growth follows them out. Now here, you're an island, you know, other than the other side of the bridge. So the land itself isn't going to expand and to grow, but you still have some infill and some development pockets that need to take place. And there's always going to be that challenge between a housing mix of affordability and what people can live. You know, probably most of the employees here in this community probably live outside the community, because it may be very difficult to find housing in this community. So some of the things that you face aren't unique, other than the fact that you're fighting very, very hard to maintain that small town beach feel that is very unique in the sense of the explosion in Florida. And if there's probably one thing that, you know, sticks out, and it's on every piece of paper that you have, no matter where you go, it's the picture, and it's that picture there on the wall.
Oh, that's just, you know.
No, that pier, that's your identity. That's your logo.
That's the photographer right there.
No, that's your signature. I mean, right there on that seal. That has to get done and get done right. And I know the funding and stuff is there, but there's a difference between funding and getting a project done. It's done when there's a ribbon cutting and all of you are getting your picture taken out there, and these folks can go back out on that pier, and the folks who come here into this town. So I look at that and think, to some degree, that's probably the most important thing, because that's your identity, and you need to get your identity back.
Scott, you took a picture of our identity.
Absolutely.
It is. It's in
And in
everything.
2 years, he's going to take another one, and we're going to
Yep.
put it next to
Look a little different.
Yeah, I was going to say the picture would be smaller today, right?
Let's start with some questions. Mayor, I'll let you kick it off this time.
All right, I'm going to just give a candid question here that I had it figured out. It was within the, what do you plan to do during your first 6 months if you were to take the job as city manager here in our community?
Well, the first things you do is you sit down immediately with staff and you get totally briefed on what they're doing, what projects, and you also take that time to get to know them. Because you don't come in with preconceived ideas of what you're going to do. You want to learn from the folks that are here doing it and what obstacles are maybe in the way, what challenges have they had that maybe that can help with. And the other is just as important, is the 6 of you. You're elected by the citizens of this community to set that vision. So the person who's sitting in this chair has to understand clearly what that vision is, both short and long term. So, you know, that won't take 6 months to get that down, but those are the first 2 main priorities, because without knowing the employees and knowing what you want and meshing those two, nothing else matters from there, because you won't get those accomplished. That all has to be done at the same time as all of these projects that are in the pipeline still continue to move forward, and the day-to-day job gets done. No different than what I watched here Wednesday night, you know, everything from intergovernmental relations that needs to be discussed and how you go forward in terms of that, a 39-unit apartment complex and what defines recreation that you had a healthy debate about. So it's getting to know the employees, where they're doing, understanding your clear vision and where that's gone wrong or where you believe it needs to be corrected, and then maybe meshing that together and getting the train on the tracks and running in the right direction.
Good. Another one I had was, our residents here in this community, we have heard over the past 1.5 years, 2 years about communication, and projects that are going on within the city. How can they immediately see where the project status is? And how can you elaborate on how you would effectively communicate with us and the residents, as well as letting the residents know where your project status is?
Well, I know you all are doing a kind of report process now that's coming out, I think, is it weekly, that I saw at the library, and, you know, and social media and stuff. So, I mean, there's all the tools that are out there for us to communicate today, but on a day-to-day basis, this whole business is communication, all right? That's what it's about. These folks are paying for those projects. You're paying for those projects, and you want to know what's happening. I believe you get in trouble in this business when you don't communicate. You don't get in trouble when you over-communicate. I would rather send 10 emails to every one of you a day about a particular item and have you determine which one you don't need, than not send it and be at a meeting and have one of you look at me and say, how come I didn't know about that? It is critical that that communication goes both ways. Internally, totally open and transparent, open door, staff meetings. Don't meet people to death, but let's find out what's going on, where we're at this week, where we're going, and then let's recap, you know, what got accomplished and where we're at. Those updates can be done, again, through your newsletter and the updates, and they're going out. I also believe that for citizens, they need to be able to know that when they call a city manager, send an email, or show up at City Hall, he or she is also available to see them. I recognize that sometimes I may be in a meeting or I may have an issue, but I've learned in this business that when someone comes to see you at City Hall, they're usually frustrated about something, and it is a lot easier to take the time, to take 10 minutes out of your day to listen to them, get their name and number. What is that issue? Maybe I've got the answer there, and if I don't, at least I can tell them, okay, I now will know what it is. Let me get back to you. And then the follow-up of that is then I'll send that same message to the 6 of you. and the sense of what's out there, so that when you're sitting at a restaurant or you're out visiting around, somebody doesn't come to you and say, you know what, I went to City Hall, I called, I didn't hear anything. Nobody got back to me. You will never hear that from me in terms of communication.
That's it for right now. We can go down the dais.
Okay,
I can
Commissioner
come back
Sherman.
if necessary.
Yes, Mr. Gleason, would you mind sharing with everybody what we kind of touched on today when we met? One of the things that really caught my eye was your ability to manage a budget. And can you just mention your past of, I believe it was one of the communities that you went to, that they were almost on the borderline of bankruptcy. Can you just kind of elaborate a little bit more for the public on that matter?
Yeah, the city of Mascot was $6 million in debt in 2011 when I came in February. They were within months of reporting to the state legislature and the governor, and Florida was called a financial emergency. A city's not allowed to go bankrupt, but if they're in that kind of trouble, they have to turn themselves over to the state. They don't immediately come in and take over, but they start putting some eyes and boots to what you've got in place. So prior to us even having to do that, I got a plan in place that was very austere. It left vacancies and positions and streamlined the staff that was there. It was a recommendation to go to the highest millage rate in the very, very beginning to get you out of this hole. What they had done, and they'd planned on a wastewater treatment plant, and had spent almost $6 million on the process to never then go through with it. And thank God they didn't, because if they had, they might not have survived. I don't know if I could have gotten them out of $15 million in debt. So from 2011 to 2013, we had the highest tax rate in Lake County, and it was going to debt. It was going to debt. In 2013 to 2017, that $6 million in debt was paid. The city was debt-free in August of 2017. 7 of the 9 years after those first 2, we lowered taxes every year and built reserves from $300,000 to $1.8 million when I left. In Littleton, I got there and there was $250,000 in reserves. The auditors will be there Monday night to report that we're $1.6 million. The last 2 budgets have returned $1.2 million to the taxpayers. In the last 2 years, the budget rate didn't increase for the folks up there, even in the year of inflation that we went on. Some of that's luck, but some of it is managing and keeping a tight handle on what needs to be done. So I'm not telling you that I can every year we'll cut taxes, but historically you go back and look, I have seemed to have had the luck, if you want to call it that way. One city I had in Georgia, they had no debt, but I found out within 6 weeks on the job they had no money, and I wasn't going to make payroll. And the commission thought they had $1.2 million in reserves. It was an IOU from a rental car companies that were part of the airport, and so they were counting on the rental car taxes, and it's like, well, if they're not renting the car, they don't owe you the money. It's not going through that. So I had to scramble up there and do a TAD, a tax anticipation note within 6 weeks, where you're able to borrow 70% of your last year's reserves, but you have to pay it off within that year in December, just so that we didn't show up in the newspaper of having police and fire officers saying, I got no paycheck in terms of there. So I've had some pretty good challenges in reference to overcoming some financial catastrophes.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Bellhumeur.
I'll defer for now. For a moment.
Commissioner Mealy.
That makes me nervous. One of the things that we talked about earlier, and I think you should talk about, was economic development. This is a small town where we want to retain, you touched on it a little bit, retain the old Florida feel. So how do you do economic development or redevelopment and yet retain the old Florida feel?
And definitely, there's a challenge in that. And the advantage to you, as we said before, there's not a ton of land of tracts to be developed, so it's how redevelopment occurs. You know, if you go from the south or the north, there are lots that are available, and they're most likely going to be residential and probably single family. I know we've got some apartments going in on across 100 and to the east, or let me get my direction.
west.
East would be going to the ocean. We're not building apartments in the ocean. We're going to the west.
No, not yet.
Yeah, and 39 units, but the key is looking at your master plan, your zoning, and you've got your height density that's here for the hotel and whatever, and it's just making sure those rules and regulations are followed. You've got a CRA, that is designed to kind of help an area redevelop and reform itself. And I know there can be some controversies in terms of CRAs because of some of the rules and regulations, but you use those tools that are to your advantage. But in doing so, you not only make sure people follow the rules, but you make sure everybody follows the rules. One thing we have to be is consistent with everybody. And whether you live in the trailer park or you live oceanfront or you live in a condo or you live Halifax side, should expect the same level of communication, service, and accountability in the sense of the rules apply to everybody, equally and fairly. And so if someone wants to come in and develop something and they want to try to do a side deal, no, you guys are the only ones who do the deals. If they want to change the rules, you change the rules. Jim doesn't change the rules. I follow your rules.
Want to talk a little bit more about CRAs, what a CRA is, what it does?
Yeah. Community Redevelopment Agency, well, as you know, it takes an area of your community and it, when it's created, it kind of holds the tax base of a certain level. And then as the taxes increase, it's that incremental increase goes into a CRA pot. So on one hand, it has a negative effect on a general fund budget because it takes any value increase in there and that doesn't go to police and fire in terms of that nature. But what that money is supposed to do then is to help incentivize some of the redevelopment, and it could be even on a commercial area where that's at, could help businesses with their facades or, kind of the remake of the look if you're trying to create and restore some damage from hurricanes and things like that to help them in terms of using those dollars. So a CRA, when it's put into place, you study where it's at, so that it's an area that you really are focused on that wants to, when I use the word redevelop, sometimes it's just refurbishing and bringing it up to the aesthetics in terms of that process. If you're talking about expanding one, you'd want to take a look at that and see what that impact would be on your general fund and where the benefit would be on that. And what people have to realize too is that sometimes there are specific rules with CRAs that can be frustrating for some folks. And so I think with good communication and transparency, you can sit down. I know there was some discussion in the meeting that night with some issues with the CRA. And I think it's just probably some communication that could probably be had that may help that.
And you would make sure that communication?
Same kind of communication we're doing now, and I would on any issue with you or with staff. There should be no surprises in this business, okay? None of us want to come into this room and be blindsided by anybody or anything. That's the most uncomfortable position to be in. And so my job is to make sure you know as much as you can, and I also hope that if you have an issue, you'd let staff know and not use a commission meeting to blindside staff either. And not saying that you have, but there are times that you know something, say something. It's okay if you say it in public, but tell us up ahead of time that this is what the issue is and let us at least try to get you some information.
All right, and among staff members as well, because a lot of staff members aren't involved in the CRA, but sometimes it overlaps.
Everybody's part of the team, and while they don't necessarily have to know every detail about something else, but in staff meetings, I like a nice round table where I like a good update on what's going on in your area and why is that important. And so it's kind of creating that internal communication, so at least there's an understanding, and especially if two departments are involved and if there's some difference between how they're seeing it, it's making sure that logjam is cleared.
Okay, thank you. Same question, asked other people about grants, how you go about getting them, maintaining them, monitoring them.
Well, the last couple of years, if you're looking for money, it's been ideal years for governments in reference to ARPA and the additional federal funds. But those days are coming to an end, so we got to be careful that we didn't get drunk on that money in the sense of it's going to dry up. And in terms of like ARPA, it came in 2 installments and you have a certain period to spend that. But even that said, there are always going to be federal federal money that's out there and state money. And while staff may not have the expertise to write a particular grant, and many communities will utilize outside resources, but you've got to make sure that you've prepared your city for those grants, okay, in the terms of the term shovel ready. Okay, if you're going to get in line and ask for $1 million, you need to be able to show the state and the federal government that you're serious enough that you've already spent some money and some work into engineering in the project. So when you're ready to submit, they know you're ready to go. And then it's not just get the grant, it's then get it done.
And I'll let, because we only have 5 minutes.
We're going to have a 5-minute marker, but let me offer a suggestion. Let's move our break to the end of the interviews. Are you all okay with that? And then after the interviews, then we can have a break and then further discussion on moving forward. Are you all okay with that? Yes. Okay. That way it gives us a little bit of time buffer because we're less than 5 minutes and I think we're going to go a little bit over. All right, so Commissioner Spradley.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Gleason. One of the issues the city faces is with infrastructure, and of course, that's the first challenge that you would inherit if chosen, and especially when it comes to stormwater, wastewater, and the fact that half the city seems to be subject to being flooded, whenever, not just a hurricane, but as time goes on with lesser and lesser events, the flooding occurs more frequently. So could you share with us any experience, successes that you've had with infrastructure, with problems in any of the places you've been employed before?
Well, I showed up at Littleton, and not only were there 19 folders on the desk, but within 2 weeks, their wastewater treatment plant had 2 screw pumps that are the main drivers of pumping that sewage through. One broke, and the other started making noises. And those 2 went, your entire sewer system was down for a town. You're talking about homes and businesses. And they're also right along the Ammonoosuc River in the state of New Hampshire, which feeds into the Connecticut. And those screw pumps were 32 and 33 years old, and they had a lifespan of 25 years. And up there they call it Yankee frugalism. There's a thing about being efficient, but there's also a time when you should be putting money aside. So within a matter of a couple of weeks, we had a $2 million project out because there was lead time on these pumps, and I had to arrange for backups and generators and additional pumps if they was broke, that we had standby pumps to be able to keep that plant going. Those screw pumps have been replaced, and that plant is running, but phase 2 and phase 3 are going on now, and that's changing the, what I call the circulator, center and the end stage distribution of that process going out, and it's also being expanded because the town had to stop taking septic from those that were still on septic because we had the capacity, but we weren't able to treat it because of the problems with the plant. So just on a plant alone, it was walking in and within a matter of weeks finding out that the last thing I wanted to know would be the guy that was known for the S getting into the river. Okay?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
And one last question. And you've gotten to know, as you've become familiar with our community, that if you are selected, there are at least 4 major projects that you would be walking into. What level of reluctance, if any, do you have about starting a job where you have that level of chaos happening when you start?
That's this business, okay? And if any one of the 4 of us who came here thought this was a retirement job, if they weren't here on Wednesday night, they might have seen it on the channel. No reluctance at all. Like I said, I walked into what I did, and we all would like that city that's got so much money that they don't know what to do with it, and there are no problems, and everybody's happy. But you know what? I haven't found that one yet, so okay. I don't have any fear.
Great, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Bellinger.
Yeah, I'll just ask one. What would you do to help with recruitment and retention of staff?
Well, I think you all did one of that Wednesday night, and that was that final implementation of your salary survey and study that put into place. Now, I don't know, I saw draft of that was sent to us to look at, so I'm going to have to look and see how that impacted. So, you're competing not only with the private sector, but, you're competing with Flagler County and Palm Coast, and even to some degree Ormond Beach, and I think some of your employees even drive as far as New Smyrna. So, so you're competing with those other entities. Now, you can't necessarily say we can be Orlando, but you also want to be competitive. So I think you've done a step in that direction, at least with pay. And I think there was also a couple of changes that you did in your personnel policy, minor, but were important in the sense of how they clarified some things. The other part of retention and recruitment is having the right management, where people feel good about where they're working. You've got folks here, and I heard the word over and over again, family, and that's how they feel about this place. But I think what I did hear, though, is that they felt that they kind of didn't have someone in this chair that had the same initiative in reference to their role and their responsibility, but also a person that would also hold them accountable, not just let things go as is, but to be there. And each one of you, I think, have in my packet, and you got information on us all. Probably the proudest thing I've got is the review, not from my bosses in May of this year, but it was the 10 reports that reported to me. And if you've all had a chance to read those, and you read what those individuals wrote about the fear they had, a guy coming in from Florida who didn't even know New Hampshire. What's he going to do to us here in the workplace? The irony of it is they all know I'm here today because I'm transparent. Not one of them said, "Good luck, Jim." They said, "Have a safe trip."
Okay, thank you.
That's it?
That's it.
I got just one question in the interest of time, because I want to give you some time to ask questions as well. So in your tours around the city and reviewing everything, talking with staff and just the overall observations, what do you view as things that you personally are going to struggle with most? I'll give you an example. As you're going around, you're like, I can fix this, I can fix this, I can fix this, no problem. And then there's other things you see where you're like, this is going to keep me up at night. What are those things?
Probably the stormwater and the flooding is number one, in the sense, because I did ask, where would you not live? Okay, very honestly, and that's not something that can be fixed overnight. You've got houses and roads, and so that's pretty heavy investment in infrastructure. It's great if it's brand new development and they're required to retain 100% of their stormwater and has no impact on outside lands, but that's not what we've got the beauty here. So I kind of see that, in Florida, we can get a good afternoon rain that can dump more rain than some folks get, in a month in terms of that process. So just in some of the back streets and some of the areas, and had pointed out in terms of that problem, and then I saw the pictures of the flooding in the lift stations, that were underwater, and I know they've been raised in terms of that area. But that's probably the one that would, almost like your wastewater treatment plant, that kept me up at night, was wondering. And when that flooded one day when I was there, and I had to come into a room, and you could see the line on the wall where the sewage had lined up to and flooded all their pumps and whatever. So that's one of those ones that would give me, concern in terms of that. And I'm going to put your plan on that list. Yes, the plan is there and it's ready to go, but has it been put out to bid? Is there a start date? Is there construction? Is there a timeline? The longer you go, the longer there's a chance that something can happen, and that's got to get going. And I know it's not a sexy project, it's not a park and that kind of thing, but again, that plant stops. People take for granted when they take a shower and they flush the toilet until it doesn't work.
Wastewater can be sexy. If you really stretch things. Any other observations?
Well, I think the CRA, and especially involving maybe that the trailer park. I mean, I think that's something that somebody would have to get up to date and involved in. I mean, again, I recognize you've got to have housing, and not everybody can afford to be in certain areas, but it is making sure whatever that communication problem is that was going on there is kind of get to the root of it and get it clarified, so that if a developer is being asked to do something, then let's make sure what they're being asked to do is exactly what the rules and regulation are saying. And sometimes they may not like the rules and regulations, but that's what they are. If they want them changed, then we can come back and have that conversation with the group of you all. And then we all know everybody wants the dunes and the fencing and the pathways and the crossovers, but those are things that will get done, and those things that are in process, they're not the kind of things that'll keep you awake at night, maybe like the stormwater and the sewage would.
Okay. Your turn. What questions do you have for us? He's getting a binder out.
No,
We only have about 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah, we know we have our homework. Is quite honestly, what are each one of you looking for? What are your expectations of the person sitting in this chair?
We'll run down real fast. Mr. Spradley.
A competent multitasker.
Commissioner Mealy.
I think I think you could tell from the questions that we asked what we expect, but to put it in those few words, I like what Scott said.
I want you to be boring. And I'll tell you why. Because boring has no surprises. It's predictable, and it's just smooth. And I try to make sure we run our meetings so they're boring, because that's not what anybody needs in a work environment. And so boring is good when it's done right.
Transparency. That's across the board, between us and yourself and the public as well.
Sure.
So.
An assertive leader.
Communication and staying on the tasks of the commission and not going down your own road of creative tasks.
There's enough on the list that you've created. I or anybody else would be foolish. And I will say this, and this is in a great respect. Each one of you have your ideas and your pet peeve. But if you come to me with your idea and it hasn't been vetted by the board, I'm going to suggest to you, put it on the next agenda, because what you don't want me do is running off on 6 different paths, spending staff time and money to find out that 3 or 4 other people up there said, not only what the heck are you doing, why'd you do it?
Yes.
So how you stay on task and you stay done is you stay focused on what you want done, and that's what we do. And there's not a thing that the 6 of you have said that scares me or challenges me. Maybe being boring might be the hardest, but no surprises.
All right, any other questions?
How soon do you want somebody here?
What was that?
I said, how soon? Yeah, I know you've been through a transition with your interim. I mean, what's your time frame?
Tomorrow.
We start
Yesterday.
budgeting next Wednesday.
Yeah, I know up there they're January, December, but here in Florida, your public hearings are not in September. We're not that far away in terms of that process. If I were the candidate, I do have a contract and I owe them 30 days. They took a risk on me in 2020 of April of 2021. So I have a board meeting Monday night. I don't know when you'll make your decision, but I would like to make sure that I give that board their 30 days for what they gave me and the opportunity they gave me. And if I were working with you and I had a 30-day notice and I was going somewhere else,
we would expect to see
that.
No, absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. We are out of time. On behalf of this dais and the entire city, I appreciate your time, you coming down here all the way back to your home state from New Hampshire, and it's very appreciated. So thank you very much, and also thank you for being here for the citizens too, to talk with everybody.
thank you for the invite, and I will have the opportunity to have dinner with my wife and my son and my grandkids, a little bit out of the norm in terms of there. So again, I appreciate it, and regardless of your decision, I wish you all the very best, and I hope you get the best candidate that's going to take you forward. And I know who that is. His name's Jim Gleason. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we used our break time, so we're looking.
You said to wait till the after.
Correct. But we just don't want to be taking a break at 6. Maybe 6:30.
No, I think whatever time we're done with the next two, then we take 10 minutes.
Right.
Whatever time that is.
That'd be 3:55. 3:55. How you doing, sir? All right.
Do I have to get sworn in?
Not yet. You get the hot seat, though.
Yeah.
And while everybody's getting settled, if you can, just tell us a little bit about your background and what you've been doing. Bring us up to speed, and then also what brought you here to Flagler Beach.
Sure. Todd Michaels, was born in the city of Milwaukee, spent most of my career in the Milwaukee area, graduated from UW-Milwaukee with a political science degree and then a Master of Public Administration from UW-Milwaukee. First real job for about 6 years was with the Village of McChesney Park, Illinois, which is a suburb of Rockford, Illinois. I started out there kind of in an effort by the village board to move the elected treasurer on. So I went there basically and eventually took over all the accounting functions, all the treasurer's functions, and the treasurer became basically ceremonial. So I can do accounting. I've done accounting for many years, including preparing for their audit, things like that. When the job opened up in the Milwaukee area, basically 2 miles from my house where I grew up, about 2 miles, with Village of Greendale, I went there, interviewed. They needed a clerk treasurer, which serves statutory clerk, statutory treasurer, and it's really the finance director. So then I did that for a number of years until the village manager decided to go into the private sector, and I had operated basically as his assistant anyways. You know, we would go and behind closed doors, and I would make suggestions to him. He, vice versa. So then, last 15 years until almost exactly a year ago, I was village manager there. We made tremendous progress on redevelopment around our regional mall, the infrastructure, water tower, fire station we built. And a little over a year, about a year and a half ago, I knew I was coming up on 55 years old when I could pull my pension, so I notified them in November of 21 that I was going to leave July, I think it was 8th of 22. So I helped the recruitment for my job. I helped them do that. We hired somebody, and then I moved on, and I've been essentially retired for the last year. But this interests me more and more the more I'm here, because there's a lot to do here, and a lot of opportunities for success. I was kind of bored where I was. I was there for over 23 years, and redeveloping the mall for a second time wasn't in my future.
It's not exciting, huh?
And to be honest with you, if you have a mall, which you don't, because I know you don't, because I wouldn't be here if you had a mall. Malls are done. I mean, the banks foreclose on them, and then they can't even sell them. Then they have to operate the bank, probably operate the mall in likely perpetuity. It's going to hit the banks. They all say it's going to eventually. The commercial loans are going to hit the banks, and so are all these office loans in the big cities where now everybody's remote. Yeah, I mean, it really is, I'm more of a summer person. You know, I don't really do any winter activities. I tried that about 25 years ago and shattered my left femur, so I quit snowmobiling. But yeah, that's kind of why I'm here. Where I've been, why I'm here.
In the village that you ran, can you tell us a little bit about some of the stats, the size and population?
We were about 14,000 people, residents. We also had the mall, obviously, in a retail corridor, so probably another maybe 5,000 or 10,000 daytime population, somewhere probably about 5,000, I would guess. Full service, community, police, fire, DPW, library, all the things you do, except we didn't treat sewage and we didn't treat our water. We got it from the city of Milwaukee, we got the water from, and distributed it, and we had a metropolitan sewage district that did the sewer. We just pumped it to them. Otherwise, you know, we had about 100 full-time employees, you know, 30 police officers, 19 firefighters, small office staff. We were very lean in our general government. It really was, it is, I should say, a really nice community. I mean, it's kind of a place where people want to go. So my job there was to keep that going. You know, try to find efficiencies, try to find a way to keep the high level of service that we had. And, you know, I normally don't say I say we, but, you know, we were very successful. And I really wanted to go out on top too. And I knew with the mall, it was going to drag us down. There's no question. Because we had it assessed at about 190 million, and it's now probably zero, or it should be, which that's a huge shift in tax burden when that happens. I think it's this year or next that it hits, because they have a development agreement that keeps it at 190, and then once the development agreement's over, it'll drop to near zero, which is really unfortunate, because, you know, 3 years ago we had, you know, every place there was full. I mean, we still have Macy's. We had Boston Store. They went bankrupt. Our Sears was all redeveloped by the Seritage people. Penny's was still there. We put 2 different apartment complexes on the grounds. We had a Ruby Tuesday going. We had a Walmart going when I was there. Panda Express. We did Panda, US Cellular. I mean, a lot of commercial experience, you know, putting those type of things in, and a lot of pertaining to here. I mean, we were through 2 floods in 2008 and 2010. Did the whole FEMA, basically the same thing you guys do without the actual, you know, wind. Built building. I told you, I said I built buildings. I'm proud of what I did there, and I think a lot of that translates to here. What you're looking at in the near future.
All right, let's start with some questions. Commissioner Bellhumor, I'll let you go first.
Let me go first, huh?
You can't defer this time.
I'm guessing you've had a chance to review our budget? Any
Yes.
surprises or concerns you've ran into while doing that?
No, it's hard to really come in a short period of time and try to do things from the outside. You know, your budget one thing I saw immediately was you don't have any detail in. It was hard for me to even figure out how many employees you have. I mean, I knew how many total because it was in the brochure, but you didn't have how many full-timers, how many part-timers, how many police officers, you know, just to get an idea how it was put together. And I'm retired. I spent probably over a week going through your website trying to find things. So budget-wise, you know, I mean, I agree. I think your effort to increase revenues from people outside of the community, it's right on. I mean, you should be doing that. Anything you can, because if they're going to use your services, they might as well pay for it in some way, shape, or form. I don't know what that is, but they should.
Okay. How would you approach improving communication and transparency with the public?
Try any means possible. We did a newsletter which we had a lot of technical information and notices and things like that, things that are coming up, things that passed. We did a magazine which was more of a fluff piece. We had somebody put that together. They had me in there when I was retiring. We did bi-weekly updates that you could sign up for, which told you what the village board was doing, what they were going to do at the next meeting or consider. Really, anything you have available. I had said, and I think the press took it kind of the wrong way here locally. We used to have two major dailies in Milwaukee. They then went down to one daily. We had community newspapers in almost every community. Those are all gone. So if your paper is very active, I work with them very closely because I come from a situation where it isn't very active. They're reducing staff continually. Now they print the Milwaukee paper in Chicago and drive it up. So it's basically yesterday's news. But I would use if you have a good newspaper, or daily or online, use whatever I can. I mean, there's certainly nothing to hide. I've operated my entire life, as if you have to be prepared to explain what you did to 50 to 100 people, and I've done it. I mean, we had a bad idea to put some affordable housing in an area that was historically affordable housing, and the people came out. We must have had 1,500 people at that meeting, and you just explain what the concept is. The problem is with that proposal is we had a concept plans, and we could not say it will not be affordable housing because you can't, as a municipality, be against affordable housing. So the people that came out on that issue, there was nothing we could use to diffuse that.
And I don't want to jump on what you're saying. So I was going to ask what generated that response, that type of engagement. Was it just a lot of the fact that it was affordable housing got everybody?
No, the interesting thing about that whole situation, and that's probably the biggest misstep I've ever been involved in, and we were just trying to revitalize our downtown a little bit and take a underutilized parking lot and put some apartments and bring more people to our little downtown. The more people, the more shopping, the more dining. And so we had some concept drawings done. And then basically one person who's now like one of my best friends and that was in Greendale, she ran around telling everybody it was going to be the affordable housing, put flyers, leaflets, and we ended up, in the end, the village president basically said, we're giving up on this. Put out a letter saying, we're not going to do this. And the irony is, it was in the village center area, which is a historic workforce housing project. So it was very, very interesting from that standpoint. From, the people who are in the affordable housing don't want affordable housing. It was an interesting situation, very. And it took us by surprise. We just weren't prepared for them to be, and it would have been a nice new development, but, you learn. I mean, not everything's perfect. I mean, I've learned throughout my career, anybody who's giving you consistently good results, they're lying about something, because nobody's perfect.
Good, Jane. I was just messing. So the person that got everybody stirred up was, you said, your best friend?
She, ironically, we decided, and she may get wind of this, I don't care, we had a really good relationship towards the end. We put her on Plan Commission. She ran our parade. They made me be the parade marshal last July 4th because I was retiring. They made me drive in a 430 mile brand new Corvette. Didn't get to drive it, but it was red on red. Yeah, she did the parade, and she's telling me how wonderful. I just saw her a few weeks ago, and it's just interesting how. And I treated her fairly through the whole. I mean, that's how I treat people. Like you want to be treated. Obviously, there's some people you treat a little better. We had a local billionaire, who had some unique ideas, like he wanted to put the Norman Rockwell statue on a corner, and we all were like, if he wants a statue, go ahead. He paid for a $200,000 gateway arch that we put up, paid for half of the second one. I talked him into buying an $8.5 million property that he had actually absolutely no use for.
Could we get him to move down here?
He probably would, because he did give up on Palm Springs.
No.
The politics wasn't for him anymore.
Commissioner Valiamer, I didn't want.
I'm good.
Okay.
Everybody get a chance.
Commissioner Spradley.
Thanks, Mr. Michaels, for being here. Couple questions. Could you tell us, because of what we're being confronted with here in the city with significant infrastructure repairs and rebuilding to do, could you share with us any significant infrastructure challenges and successes that you've had in your career?
We had an aggressive infrastructure plan, both for, the underground, above ground buildings. We relayed water main in our historic, which is now 85 years old. We relayed a bunch of water main, roads. We put environmental swales in a major road we had where it drained through sand, and then it was supposed to try to clean it all up. I led the whole effort to build our new fire station from the point of a needs analysis team, including firefighters, elected officials, citizens, all the way to, the grand opening. So, I mean, it's, you learn a lot when you start digging.
Right.
Nobody told us that, nobody knew or remembered, right where the fire station foundation, there used to be a huge Wisconsin Electric vault there, about the size of like a cement mixer tub. So that cost us a bunch of money, but we did borings, and you do your best. I mean, we had probably 30 borings done along the hole, and it just right between them. You got to be ready, and I'm good at, I don't get excited. I don't, we work it out. Whether it's a change order or working with a contractor, working with employees or the people who are directly out there observing the work, I try to say yes if I can, and try to get things done. I mean, that's why, I'm not afraid to make a mistake, because I know, I've done it for 30 years. I'll make way more positive effect than mistakes. I mean, I bet you it's 50 or 100 to 1, which is a pretty good ratio. But yeah, I mean, we relayed water main in our historic downtown area, found out there's all kinds of live electrical lines that they don't know about. The electric company doesn't. So yeah, it was
That sounds
thing to learn.
it was the old. We were originally built by the feds, so it was they called it the federal system. Well, eventually they turned it over to Wisconsin Electric, and they shouldn't have had the plans, but they didn't. So the contractor kept hitting all these live lines, which isn't much fun. Then they wanted I think they wanted like $400,000 for overages because of the system that we didn't know about either. We told them to pound sand, and they never came back. I mean, we're talking, that's 5 years ago, so I don't think they're getting their money. And we had on-site inspectors, so we knew that they really didn't waste time. They just moved. Change orders are everything in the bidding business.
Mm-hmm. I have one more, and you've learned as you've gotten to know Flagler Beach a little bit that if we offer you the position, there's going to be a huge demand for capable multitasking. So number one, do you have any reservations about that? And related to that, you've shared with me, and I think you mentioned last night, that your interest in coming to Flagler Beach to work has increased dramatically over the last few days. If you could tell us why that is.
Well, when I came here, first off, I'm flying out of one of the crummier airports in the country, which is O'Hare. And then I'm coming into Orlando, which is one of my next least favorites. Then I'm driving through a thunderstorm to get here. That's after a certain airline did circles on the tarmac, literally did a full 360, which I've never seen in an airport, an airplane do. You know, and I came and I looked around, disappointed at the infrastructure would be a mild statement from me. You know, the early stuff they did, and it's no fault of anybody in this room, obviously, but, you know, they just created subdivisions that did no grading whatsoever. I mean, there's not even an effort to pitch away from the homes to set the elevation such. But, you know, the more I looked at it, you know, there's a lot of challenge here. And for me, at this point in my career, you know, I don't want to do boring things. I look forward to the pier. You know, that's a neat thing, to build things and know you made a difference. And that's really the challenge, is why I would come.
Commissioner Mueller.
Yeah. Most people would think you come from the Midwest, you must have no dealing with flooding or having to deal with FEMA. Now, I know that's not true.
No, we went through.
So if you would elaborate on that.
Yeah, we had 2 major thunderstorms, one in 2008, one in 2010, both when I was manager. I literally waded through the street, you know, disappointed it was happening. You know, I was a year into the manager job at that point, so I wasn't as confident as I am now. And, you know, we decided course of action after the fact. With the first one, obviously we did damage assessments. We had our firefighters go door to door, and we created lists of properties that were damaged and what was done. And I think having the firefighters go door to door really, it may not have helped financially or with the damage, but it made people feel like we cared and we were going to try to get aid. At that point, we didn't know we were going to get FEMA aid. So that was the first storm. Second storm, basically the same thing happened. We knew where the floods were, what flooded the first time. And we were a very good community. I mean, very good infrastructure. It's just torrential rains that none of it was designed for. You know, when you're talking 300-year rains, it's equivalent to a hurricane, really, other than the wind. We had first floor flooding. In 2010, we had first floor flooding again in a number of buildings. And that was at the point then where I finally had enough, how should I say it? The board was willing to spend money. You know, we couldn't have this happen every 2 years. So we increased storm inlet sizes in different places, in low areas. We took an area, we redid the street to make it so it was a hump and water couldn't get through. And then we increased the size of the box culverts. We also did get money for snowstorm one year from FEMA. I think that was a federal election year. I swear it was. I just can't remember.
It's amazing how that works.
It's amazing, especially in a swing state like Wisconsin. Yeah. No, so and nothing against people that deal with FEMA, but they try to make it as easy as possible. You know, they send people who are very experienced out to help you do everything.
In Wisconsin?
Yeah.
They did.
We need those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they were excellent. I mean, helping through the whole process. I mean, we have good people too. I mean, our accounting staff was very good.
No,
and
that's not what we're reacting to.
It's a different tone sometimes with Florida, occasionally with FEMA, sometimes.
Well, it depends who's in office, I would assume.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, in relation to the storms and FEMA, that being prepared for storms, we know, no, we don't know. We're informed several days ahead of time that we could be having.
Here it comes, yeah.
It's not like what just happened in Vermont and upstate New York, where that just happened. So are you knowledgeable about preparing ahead of time.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everybody in the country all had to go through the NIMS training and all the disaster preparedness. You know, we had a disaster plan just like I'm sure you guys do. I mean, you know, you prepare for what you expect. I mean, we didn't prepare for hurricanes, obviously, because we won't get them, but we prepare for, you know, tornadoes, power outages. We had straight line winds one year that just tore down trees all over. I mean, it just was a totally remarkable storm. Yeah, I mean, you prepare for the worst and hope it's the best. I mean, that's kind of, you know, how I go through life. I mean, hopefully, you know, I can get some free plane ride home, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Just a reminder for everybody, we're at 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll let
Okay, Commissioner Sherman.
Yeah, this is just one question. So you were, you know, based on your background, you were in the village for 15 years. Can you explain how you managed your council, your citizens, and your staff? How did you successfully navigate that over the last, you know, over your tenure there?
No, you know, obviously we'd have staff meetings during the week, but I like to get out in the department so the employees see a face for the village manager and know who I am, I know who they are. You know, very much with our village board, it was very, how should I say it, nice that our open records law and open meetings law allowed us to go in closed session to talk about my review. So I created a system where quarterly we met, and I basically worked down a list of things and told them, okay, this is here, this is there. I can't get the developer to call me back on this project. And then what's done, you know, what's in process. And it worked very well to also help manage time, because the board member couldn't come in and say, hey, I want this, we'll spend 80 hours on it, when I knew darn well there was no support. And in that way, it really helped in a number of situations, because, you know, you have different personalities. You know, we had extremely conservative board member and not so conservative board member, and, you know, they're not meeting in the middle, really. And I just try to be honest with people, and I think that's why I lasted 15 years, because I wasn't giving you a political answer. I'd say, you know, I can't do this because of this. Oh, one was Lions. The Lions wanted to adopt a highway, and our village attorney is very good. He's one of the biggest firms in the state, municipal attorneys. And I knew from talking to him on signs that we got to be content neutral then. So if we let one group put a sign up, you got to let any group put a sign up. And there's a lot of groups that people don't want on the roadside. So I had just explained to him, and he was fine with it. You know, and he was a major player. He had been ran for village president at one point, but he understood. You know, I made my point, and we, you know, sometimes we can not agree or not give you the answer you want. The next time we'll go beyond it if we can. I mean, we stepped in when the veterans wanted to build a memorial. The school district told them no, because it was going to, I believe it was, their statement was, school board thought it had no educational value. And it turned very ugly for them. So then we came in and we said, why don't you give the land to us? We'll let them put it in, let them raise the money. And eventually they did it, and the memorial is beautiful. But it's hard to explain. You know, that was a really unique project because they had designed it, but it was designed basically with ruler and pencil, and you can't build off of that. And I had to explain that to them. We have to have an engineer now take this concept. It'll look just like this, but he's got to engineer it so it's going to stay up. That was hard to explain to them. Oh, you know, it's the same with residents. Not everybody has the high level of, you know, knowledge of their house and floodplains, all those kind of things. But, you know, I got them to understand it. We got it built. It's beautiful.
Mayor?
Yes. My question to you would be, this is a common theme that we had this past year reoccurring at every meeting, was communication between the city manager and the residents on status of projects, status of disaster relief that would be coming through. What would be your plan to get the communication to the residents in different facets of way of doing that?
Well, I mean, first off, anybody would call me, they get a return call within 24 hours. I may not be able to help, I may not be able to give the final answer, but I will call them back and say, hey, I got your message, I'm working on it. I'll get back to you in a day, whatever it is, how big an issue it is. Obviously, we did a lot of construction projects, road resurfacing. We would leaflet the neighborhood, telling them what was going on, how the project would move forward. There'd be times when you'll think there's nothing going on because, they get the concrete work, the repair work done on the curbs, and then they move that crew out, and then the asphalt crew comes in later on, finishes the asphalt. People don't understand that you don't move around, $1 million worth of equipment on a whim. It's being used every day somewhere, and they don't leave it sit on the job site. We have a good website. The thing I noticed with yours is a lot of the information, there is only really like one way to get there. We had like a documentary just like you guys do, but we also, let's say it's the audit, it's also on the treasurer's page. So you can link from there too. So you don't have to, it took me a while to find things, and it's mainly because I wasn't in the exact spot. Ours had, like, let's say the meeting minutes, they'd be on the clerk's page, they'd be in the document storage area, maybe on Know Your Government, multiple things, if I'm clear enough on that. I've never had a problem communicating with anybody. I go out of my way. I keep a list, like, let's say the mayor would come in, I'd have a list of everything I talked to her about. So then when I put out a weekly update to the rest of you, maybe I worked for a place temporarily up north, they all worked like an hour away. So you couldn't talk to them. So you just keep the list, and then you send out an email. Here's I didn't get a chance to talk to you. Here's what's going on, to keep everybody on the same page. Because the last thing I learned early on, my uncle was a village manager, and he said, the last thing you want is somebody to walk in and say, Todd gave me this. You're full of it. You got to make sure that everybody has the same information. And you're not playing favorites. The guy I replaced, he was golfing buddies, Packer football game buddies with the village president. You can't do that. I had no friends in Greendale, not one. Now I do, but not when I was there. and you have to, you're the, Greendale we would say, and it's not because we're in Florida, but we would say it's like Disney. People literally didn't want to be inconvenienced with any road work. We'd redo your road for free. We didn't special assess. Well, not free, but it's in their tax levy. But we didn't, and they complained. It's like you're getting road free. If you were in the city of Greenfield, you'd be paying $5,000 for this. But, that's the level of service that was expected. We would say it's like Disney, and we can't enjoy it because we're the cast members. We have a lot of events, but you can't go there and act like a fool like everybody else can. And
we're starting to get behind. Did you have any other questions?
No, for the sake of time.
Okay. Did you have any questions for us?
I know I'm supposed to, but honestly, no. Just so you know, that's my answer. I've been here since Monday on purpose. I spend a ton of time on the internet looking at all kinds of different things, you'd name it, including like your average household income and all that stuff, just to kind of see where you were. No, I don't, sorry.
Okay, well, that's no problem. So on behalf of the dais and the citizens and the city of Flagler Beach, we appreciate you taking the time to come down and take time out of your day to do all the research and just spend time with us.
Honestly, I enjoyed it. I mean, it's different being, I guess, at this point in your career. I'm very, how should I say it, comfortable?
Retired.
Yeah, kind of. Well, no, I can retire. you know, I don't have that fear of losing a job. I just do what I think is right and what the people want and what you guys want.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Thanks. Bye.
All right, what we will do is we will make sure that there's a minimum of 30 minutes from start, just so everybody gets their appropriate amount of time. So that'll push us a little bit over.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah. How are you doing, sir?
Good, how are you?
You have that now.
A little bit over. All right, if you can, while everybody's getting settled, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and what brings you to Flagler Beach.
Okay. I'm David Williams. My last position was in Massachusetts, and that's where I live right now. Been looking at Florida for a while with in-laws, moving down to the area over time. So it's been an attractive thing to come down here and spend time, and just very liked it a lot. Had never been to Flagler. I originally am from Maine, so I have basically a water background.
Frozen water.
Ocean doesn't freeze. But yeah, the fresh water, yeah, it's
It
definitely all
gets all the way up
frozen.
to 40 degrees in the summer.
Oh, geez.
I used to tell people in Maine, if summer falls on a Sunday, we go on a picnic. So I always grew up fishing and whatnot, and there's a lot of water in Maine, big rivers, big lakes. The ocean was great. And then my first position in municipal government was as town administrator of West Bath, Maine. So Bath is where they build the ships, the Navy ships. So West Bath was next door, and we had about 20 miles of coastline, deep water frontage. We had most of them were year-round residents. But I had a lot of exposure to shellfish licensing and that kind of thing, and a lot of fishermen. So I've always been tied to the water somewhere. And when I saw this come up and I saw some of the pictures, I showed my family, and they were packing, and I said, so it's a very unique place here. I mean, I've been from Key West to Prince Edward Island. My great-grandfather's originally from Prince Edward Island. So I've seen a lot of coastal communities, and I have seen a lot of coastal communities lose their sense of place, that the locals can't afford to live there anymore. And they become dependent on the outsiders coming in as tourists, but they want them to leave as quickly as possible. It's just, this is a very unique situation here, and that's what attracted me.
And your most recent municipality that you were in, can you tell us a little bit about that and some of the job itself concerning that?
Town of Sherburne was, it's about 4,500 people. I think there are 2,500 lots, 3,000 lots. It was Southwest Boston rural, but it was all professional people, so we call them gentlemen farmers. So they have farms and horses, and but they're working in Boston as attorneys and doctors. So it was a very affluent community, and with affluence, they were technologically advanced, and their expectations of the staff were very high. So we didn't have a lot of staff, but we were always responsive to every resident, every elected official. There were about 25 boards and committees. 5 of those were elected. My position as town administrator, I mean, if you go to the town bylaws and try to understand it, it's barely understandable. I did try to make some improvements to it, but it was set up as like a matrix management with no central authority, other than the executive body, which is the select board, which would be, you know, the equivalent here. But the town administrator is the day-to-day operator of the town. But there wasn't any authority in the bylaws. So if there was something I wanted to do on behalf of the selectmen, it wasn't getting it done because I had something on paper saying that, you know, I was the person that could do it. It was personal relationships with everybody on the boards and the committees to get things done that way. So it was a face-to-face community of running everything. So as town administrator, I was the HR director. I was the technology manager. I was chief procurement officer, chief administrative officer, buildings director, disability coordinator. There were a lot of different hats that in the time I was there, they kept passing bylaws and giving additional titles. So I was probably the town administrator in Massachusetts with the most titles beyond their...
The everything guy.
Yeah, so you wear a lot of different hats. So the community I was in before Sherburne was Framingham, which operated as a town, but it was 80,000 people. But same sort of government, it had a town meeting form of government. And the manager there, I said, you can't give me enough titles. And that's where it all started. So he gave me a lot of titles, let me do, I mean, just the HR position alone, there were 2,300 employees, including the school department, and, you know, $200 million budget, and just running the HR alone was a full-time job. But then when you throw in chief procurement officer on top of that, and you're involved in all of the projects, which is basically bringing historical buildings up to code for, you know, disability access. And there was one building, the Maynard building, that we completely remodeled. It was an old school that was kind of dilapidated. And now it's a beautiful historical building that we leased out to a museum, and Framingham State University is there. So did I stray from the question?
No, you're still good. We were getting your background, so anything that involves your background is fair game.
Oh, okay. So I've always, for the past 20 years, I've been in municipal government. And to get something passed and have
wow.
it, yeah. The town,
okay, y'all are a little more exhausted.
The town meeting, I won't even go into it. But when I worked at the City of Bath as the finance director, that's probably the closest to this sort of structure. You know, there's an executive body that was the council and the city manager. It was a council manager form of government, which to me, as being in the IC, International City County Managers Association, is the most efficient form of government. So that is ideal to me.
We have some questions for you.
Sure.
Commissioner Sherman, you want to start us off?
Sure. So in your first 6 months here in Flagler Beach, if you were selected as the city manager, could you kind of walk us through what you would like to accomplish in those first 6 months?
Well, first is straightening out lines of communication. I would need to know what, the expectations are from the commissioners, how they want to be communicated with, what they want communicated to the public, and at what time. Some things get released before meetings, some get released after meetings. So those lines of communication between the manager and the commissioners is important. There's always a rapport with the chair that has to be identified, and everybody understand the duties of the chair and the relationship with the manager. Some want, for example, some want you to communicate everything equally to every member, but that doesn't always work when you're dealing with some issues, some HR issues, and it can be resolved more quickly than just dealing with the chair, but the rest of the commissioners would need to know that, or the mayor. So lines of communication, straighten those out, understand what works for the department heads and getting the message from the commissioners to the department heads, understanding the strategic plan, putting a strategic plan together. And I've seen the vision document, and I like it. That's a strategic plan right there, just in a different form that I'm used to. I would add some output measures to it and performance measures, and try to tie it to the budget more, because your budget is a reflection of policy and the money that you're spending. So I would work on that. And then talk to each of the department heads about the staffing. I'd like to know what the succession plans are for every position. I always want to know, when you're not here, who is in charge, or who's coming up through the ranks and what sort of training they might need, what sort of cross-training we could do. And then, so dealing with the learning how the things function is going to be, would be the first 6 months.
For the sake of time, Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Okay, Mayor?
Like many communities post-COVID, they're experiencing rapid growth and development. What would you do here in Flagler Beach to help preserve the character and the charm of our community with permitting acceptable growth?
I would have to do a little more reading of your zoning and stuff, but there is smart growth and there is good growth and bad growth. So the problem is with bad growth, you don't know it's bad growth until it's built, and then you can see that what happened. So I would like to go through the community and see what is good growth, what's bad growth. Some towns like older buildings, and they want that coastal feel of, old fishing villages type things. But other places that, they want to get away from that, and they just want the Starbucks or, I won't name any other commercials, but that kind of thing. There is good development, and if you have the space where those types of places can go, which you do on the other side of the bridge, that's just working with developers to try to get in the right place. That's the first task. When they come into a downtown area like this, I've always worked with the land use team and trying to assess any of the projects. I wasn't the final say on whether a project could go forward or not, but definitely if I'm talking to a developer, I need to let everybody know that what they're proposing is way out of line with the community. And so in Sherburne, you're limited by the infrastructure that you have, and that's the same thing in Flagler. You build up your infrastructure, and your community is going to grow to meet that infrastructure. So it takes a lot of planning, not just a couple of years. It's 10 years, 25 years.
And then I have one more. We have lots of projects that are in the works for here in Flagler Beach. We have our pier, we have our dune renourishment, we have our wastewater treatment plant, we have, I just had it and I'm missing it, the hotel. Which one of these excites you and which one gives you a little bit of caution and fear?
Something would only give me caution and fear is if there was a probability of that it wasn't going to be successful in the end. So all of those projects sound like they will eventually be successful. So it'll take extra work. So I'm not afraid of any of those, and they all seem to be working with different people. So making those contacts with the state and the county and Army Corps of Engineers, and that's really important. The hotel project is exciting, but it seems like it's kind of split among people whether it's positive growth or not. And we really won't know for sure until it's actually there. You can look at a drawing, but when you come over the bridge and see it, that's something different. So all those projects excite me. And if you have, for managing projects, I've always used a pipeline system. So you have projects move from concept and what it takes to get them passed, and then they enter the pipeline. And they start moving along, and it's just project management things. But showing graphically to people where something is in the pipeline, you can actually see all the projects listed on my board and marked where they are moving through the pipeline to completion. So you can really easily see where things are getting hung up at that point. So I would like to be involved in all those projects. So.
Okay, Commissioner Bellinger?
Excuse me.
All right, I'll just limit my questions to one.
We're doing okay on time.
All right. How would you approach improving communication and transparency with the public?
With the public,
problematic here.
In Sherburne, I applied for a grant, a technology grant through the state, redeveloped the website, and at least got correct information up on the website that was easily accessed. Started getting the minutes and the agendas posted, and then we moved to actually getting the full packets onto the website, which you already have. Excuse me?
Yeah, Penny was getting offended for a second there. Yeah, they're there.
Yeah.
Some folks, have easier time finding them than others, but they're there.
Yeah. So communications and avoiding miscommunications before they get out of hand with the public is you use technology and you use writing and paper, and you can put videos up. I used to do, with the government channel, I would bring issues there, and they could do shows, and those would run repeatedly. So that was a good way of reaching out to people. And the thing is, not everybody wants to know. Some people want to just go about their lives, so they don't want to be bothered or think that, the manager's writing he's doing a major presentation every week or something. That's time that should be spent on something else. So there's just a happy medium on what the community needs or expects. But technology can deliver those with, bulletin boards, sign-ups, email blasts. Does that answer?
Yeah, that's good enough.
But yes, it goes back to communication. It's got to be communicated, or it's going to go south. If you want somebody else telling your story for you, it's probably going to be wrong.
Yeah, and with the age of the internet and stories going around that aren't necessarily true, things can spread and go badly
very quickly.
So that's all I got for now. Thank you.
Who wants to go next?
I'll ask my question about FEMA and storm preparation.
Yeah, Sherburne, again, I was there in Sherburne for 9 years. We dealt with FEMA. We had tropical storms, not necessarily, a hurricane, but it's still a big mess that we had to deal with. Winter storms did a lot of damage. 60% of the town was wetlands, so there was flooding and unexpected flooding. So we applied for a lot of mitigation grants to address certain problems in town or problematic roads, replacing culverts and improving drainage and all that. And we also used FEMA for public safety grants. For the fire department, we had a grant that partially funded one of the positions there. So we had to keep up that application process every year, meet their deadlines, understand their processes, and go to their trainings to learn how to fill the stuff out in the first place. So keeping those relationships open and knowing who you're going to contact at FEMA in advance is very important. You want to know your contact and your liaison for, just like you would with the power company. You want to know who you need to call in an emergency. When the emergency happens, it's not the time to be trying to sort through FEMA to find somebody to, listen to what you need. So yeah, I'm comfortable with applying for grants through FEMA. They've been very, very good to the community of Sherburne with anything we've asked, as has Department of Transportation and any other state agency that we've kept in touch with.
Okay, thank you. And since there are two more of you to go,
Commissioner Sprout?
I'll pass.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Sure.
I've asked each candidate about what they think of and how they fare with multitasking, but it seems like with the way they had you with all the hats that you wore, that I don't need to ask you that question. 9 years is an impressive run as a city manager, so I understand how that position goes. Could you tell us about any challenges and successes that you've had with infrastructure issues over the years, since that seems to be kind of at the top of the list of things that we're going to be dealing with here in Flagler Beach?
Right. In Sherburne, that's how they controlled development, was curbing the infrastructure. So there was no public water, there was no public sewer. I had tried to get an article going forward for the community to at least approve a water district, knowing that at some point they're going to need a water district. But the community wasn't ready for it. But
They didn't get sued?
no,
Like you said, it's a rural area.
Okay.
no. That doesn't mean we weren't sued.
Because
By
that's an
everything.
interesting tactic to curb development that probably
Well,
would
if
not
the
work in
rest of the
Florida.
town didn't
Yeah.
happen, then they weren't discriminating.
Right. I mean, it's not something they can go out and say, this is how we're going to curb development. But in essence, that's exactly what it is. So, I recognized that as soon as I was there. when people don't want a backup system, you know. And then talking to developers, they were looking for certain infrastructure improvements, and they usually moved on when you tell them, well, you have to provide your own water, and you got to provide all your, you know, septic system to. So it just limited the size of the projects they could go through. I tried to get those projects bigger and bigger and more creative, such as locating wastewater treatment plant, like for one of the developments. The obstacle was railroad tracks, getting under the railroad tracks. And there was also a plan that we looked at for locating the leach field basically underneath the ball fields, because it was the only open space in the downtown area. So they didn't end up going forward with the project anyway. But infrastructure as far as roads, we had about, well, it was similar to A1A, 35,000 vehicles a day going through. I'm not sure what the numbers are here, but it's moving traffic from one end of the town to get out the other end of the town safely without using any services, basically. That's kind of hard in the winter, keeping when they're all sliding off the roads and stuff. And I know that's not going to happen down here.
Well, they do that all year around here.
They slide off the road.
You don't need ice
Right.
to do it.
So infrastructure is, you know, finding out which companies the town has worked with before, and which engineers you trust and which ones you've had bad experiences with. And when you make those connections and be able to put a good plan together and sell it to the community and go to the DOT for extra funding, you know, that's a project that has a high probability of success. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I don't have anything else.
We're very quickly running out of time. I want to make sure you have time to ask us questions. So what questions do you have of us?
I wrote down about 10 different pages of questions, and
one from each job title.
Well, actually, you know, that's a point, is I did break it down by like the departments that, you know, that I'm familiar with. Luckily, I got to go with the police chief and fire chief all afternoon yesterday, learned a lot, was able to ask questions then. We stopped at wastewater and the other places I could ask questions. I just spent a half hour out there talking to the guy in charge of lifeguards. I already forgot his name, but
It's Tom.
Tom.
He's an okay guy.
Yeah. So in Sherburne, you know, I had to hire lifeguards and a waterfront director, and there was a reservation manager, and so we had a lot to talk about with lifeguards anyway. The questions I have are more, I want to get into the financial books, and that's not something that I usually approach a community with, to dig in too deep to audit management letters and that kind of thing. So the short answer is no.
That was the short answer. Well, the good thing is all of our records they're public record. And so anything that you were to want documentation-wise, you can just send an email to Penny.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of that is, if it's not on the website, it's very much public record, and she can email it to you or give you a hard copy.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, that would be very informative. So, but I normally wouldn't ask for the level of detail on finances that I want to see and put staff through.
Well, you're legally allowed to ask for anything.
Yeah,
Our
right.
citizens do as well.
Right.
But what other questions do you have for us?
Just, you mentioned 6 months, what I do in my first 6 months. How would the commissioners deem the first year as being a success? I assume we would be setting goals for the manager to complete. What is that sort of process that you've
Well, that's a
done in
good
the
question.
past?
So just in a quick sentence, if y'all will just go down the line, what would be considered a success for the city manager at 1 year? Mayor, I'll let you go first.
I would like to see a true project tracker, like you said, the pipeline, available visibly on our website for all the residents to see, and it be detailed. We just had our stormwater update last night, and for a lot of residents, they're looking down to one particular valve, and it would be nice for them to be able to dial down, see that valve, and see where it is in the process. And that would be a giant leap in communication for our residents.
Okay.
Mr. Sherman.
I think the first year I'd like to see clear, concise goals, execution of our strategic plan. I don't want a city manager to come to us and say, what do you want me to get done? No. I want you to come to us and say, this is what needs to get done. You know the city day in and day out.
Right.
So I want you to come to us and say, Commissioner, Mayor, this is what I want done in this, this is what I feel, this is what my staff and I feel like that needs to be done. Okay. In the past, we were given a sheet of paper and say, what are my priorities? No, I need you to tell me what the priorities are here in the city. So I think clear and concise goals and an execution of a plan, that's what I'd like to see in the first year.
Okay.
Mr. Bellinger.
I think he was kind of asking what was how do we measure success, and it would be we have a strategic planning session typically of one form or another and come up with our goals, and that's what's used to give you guidance. And once a year we have an evaluation of the city manager and see it's usually linked to the strategic goals. And that's our typical way of doing it.
Okay.
As it has been, unless we decide otherwise
right.
That's how it would work.
Yeah, so I'm glad you guys mentioned the other things too, because there's quantitative and qualitative. So the measurement is the quantitative. The items you guys mentioned is the qualitative, that how everyone else will judge you on success. So I would plan to address all those things too.
Well, and to continue down the line, you're hearing a lot of the term strategic planning, and so a measure of success for me within the year would be the incoming city manager, to piggyback on what you said with the qualitative, would take our existing strategic plan and apply dates of completion to it that are not pie in the sky dates. They are data backed. Here's when I can get this done, and here's how I'm going to do it with dates. So all of our projects will be in progress by the end of that year with completion dates. That's what I would consider a success.
Okay.
Hey, I'm not quite that specific, but it also would relate to the strategic plan, that we have one. It's not really up to date, but to see some progress, that we've made progress on the items that are there.
Okay.
For me, there are two components to measure success after 1 year. One is that the communication system, which I think is a triangle. There's the city commission, there's the city manager, and there's the residents. 3 legs. That system is completely revamped and made effective. The second is, it's related to what we've heard, is that of the 4 or so major projects, not that they'd be completed, but that we, at least within a year, have a schedule for all 4 of them such that we can all see where we are and what the plan is. That would be a success for me.
Yeah. I mean, if I would need to see the end point of a project with some sort of timeline.
Right.
So everybody else would see the same timeline that I'm seeing. And I wanted to mention that in capital planning, I usually have a summary sheet that goes right down to specific type of bonds that we're going to need to fund the project. And also with regular meetings of the executive body, my goal was that if one of the members was busy, didn't have a chance to go through the whole packet, that they could literally come into the meeting blind, open up their packet, and read my summary sheet. It would have a brief summary. It would tell what's happened in the past with it. It would have a proposed motion, and it would have a note on their expected, what their action is expected to be. And then how they vote, we'd mark that on there, and what requires further action, like another reading or to come back to another meeting, or if they referred the item out to another board. So you could track things from those pages. But yeah, transparency and opening up things to the public are, yeah, I mean, in Sherburne, there was one resident that was a problematic resident, and I told
There's
them
no problematic residents.
he was inquisitive.
There you go.
Yeah, he was a forensic accountant is what he was. So I said, you know, you think we got something? You sit down at my desk. And I logged him in. He had complete access to all my files, emails, everything. And I said, knock yourself out, call me when, when you're ready. And he was there about 2 hours. Yeah, and
That's transparency.
yeah, but I also got that guy to build a senior development. So, you know, the communications are you just never know what's going to come out of one little contact. So,
And we are over on time. So if you don't have any, or do you have any other questions? You're good?
No.
Okay, we'll wrap it up. So on behalf of the citizens, the dais, the city, entire city of Flagler Beach, I appreciate you taking time to come join us and on all the research and personal time you've put into this.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for everything.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be back, win or lose. So.
That's it.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
And want to cover a little bit of housekeeping before we go to break, if that's okay. So we can do, if y'all are okay with it, you okay with like a 15-minute break? And then if at the end of that break, would y'all be okay with, is everybody at a point where they feel comfortable with making a decision?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So since the body will be taking action, that means there will also be public comment. And so I hope everybody sticks around until after break because the body will be taking action. Everybody feels comfortable with that. And so there will be a public input period, and then when we get back, we'll just have a discussion and see where we go from there.
Okay.
All right, 15 minutes. Thank you. Ready to go, Penny? All right, we will resume. Okay. Did you want to kick us off, or you want me to get things started?
I'll be happy to kick you off. What the heck? What we normally suggest is the first thing. Now, public comment is always a good thing, but what we suggest is that you start with a straw poll rather than have a lot of discussion, and each of you pick your top 2 candidates, and then, generally speaking, people in a city this size generally, have kind of common feelings, and so you'll have a good idea of who your top 2 are, and then there's no point in discussing the other 2. And then you may want to have some discussion, or you may want to go immediately to another poll, or just nominate somebody based on the results and see if there's support. The trick is that when you pick your top 2, you never know who's got all the first place votes and who's got all the second place votes, so you really need to vote twice.
So you would not suggest that we put number 1 and number 2?
If you want to.
I'm ready to.
Well, let's just do that. Are you all okay with, so we will pick the top 2 choices in the straw poll. And then we would use those by numbers. So it'll be a number 1 and number 2, not just a check or an X or anything. And then, so we'll turn that into Penny, and then while Penny is calculating that, because that'll just be a first round of opinions, we open it up to public comment and hear from the public, and then we'll have some discussion about the straw poll and everything else.
Okay, so you do not want me to put 1 and 2? You want
1
me
and
to
2.
Number 1.
Number 1 will be your top choice. Number 2 will be your second choice. And then, yeah. So everybody has that. All right. All right. And while that's being completed, let's open this up to public comment. So any members of the public wish to speak on the discussion of city manager, please come up, and then if you can, start by stating your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Patty King, address 2124 South Daytona Avenue, and I would like to thank you all for going through this process. And I appreciate being involved in the interviews and learning about our candidates. While all 4 were very interesting and worthwhile candidates, I feel that Dale is the best fit for our community and our city. Thank you.
All right,
And thank you for spending the entire time here.
After last time.
All right. Anybody else?
Bob Cunningham, North 10th Street. I appreciate the whole process as well as Patty, and I think I've been here the whole time you have. A lot of good candidates, a lot of good information, and looking and hearing from them and talking to them. My opinion is that Dale would be our best choice for this position. He has a lot of background in the same type of situations that we have gone through. Number 2 would be the last person, David, I forget his last name. Williams, thank you. All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak on city manager? We need feedback.
Come on, you got through.
There, thank you.
Scott Crow, South Daytona. You guys know what to do. That's all I got to say.
Oh, come on.
No, I'll piggyback. It's been a year, hasn't it? You guys have been, I was thinking about this last night, how much the city has gone through. And I wasn't sure if this was the right meeting to talk about it. But you guys have weathered the storm. You've, amazing to watch you work for this city and the love of this city throughout all the stuff that's happened, the storms, the pier, all the things that's going on here. I was thinking last night how much I appreciate not only you, but the whole staff and the city in this small little town. I'm relatively a new resident, 3 years or so. And it's just really gratifying to see
this love for this city. So that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I wish Facebook would say that. Come on up, Diane. If you can, please state your name and address for the record.
Diana McLemore, 28 Fornell Lane, Palm Coast, Florida. Yes, I'm a Palm Coast resident, but I dearly love Flagler Beach, and this is home to me as well. I commend you all also for what you've gone through and this very difficult decision. I personally, I'm so glad I came here because I have a different choice than where I came with initially, and that would be for Mr. Dale Martin. I truly believe he's got a lot of background, a lot of experience, and a lot of what we need here in Flagler Beach and Flagler County. Thank you.
Thank you. So Diane, now that you came to this meeting, are you going to start attending on the regular? Oh, there you go.
Maybe she'll even move to Flagler Beach.
There we go. All right, any other members of the public who speak on agenda item? Paulie? Not to put you on the spot or anything.
Been sitting here for hours.
I'm Paul Chestnut, 1115 North Central. I echo what everybody said here. You guys have been through a lot this year with the storms and everything else. It is hard to read some misinformation on Facebook. It really does drive me crazy. So I do feel for you guys of what you do and what you have to see. But I agree. I think Dale is a great choice, and I think you're going to hit a home run. So good luck.
Ryan, thank you.
Come on, Kathy.
Peer pressure.
All eyes on you.
You're the only one left.
Kathy Wilcox, South Central Avenue. I don't want to be the only one from the public that didn't make a statement. Thank you all. Ditto to what everybody else has said, and my vote's for Dale Martin.
All right. And thank you to all the members of the public for coming out and sitting through all this. This is probably not the most entertaining thing that you could do during the day. But I've told this to a couple constituents, and I believe that this is more important than an election. You know, these seats change often, but that seat should not change often. And it's that important that we get it right. So kudos to all of you for taking the time to come out and participate in the process. Okay, so straw poll. I'll make this real easy. We have a unanimous consensus. So that probably cuts down on a little bit of the conversation we need to have. That would be Mr. Dale Martin is the unanimous number one choice. So commission, would this body be okay with, making a motion to move forward with we'll call it the whole process of the bargaining process and
negotiating a contract?
Any discussion around that?
I'll make a motion that we ask our attorney, and are you involved in that too?
I like to be a little bit, yeah.
Okay,
If nothing else, just for background and help, because I've seen a lot of these.
Okay, so that negotiations occur with whoever is supposed to be involved, with Mr. Dale Martin to be the next city manager of Flagler Beach.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and just as a formality, is there any members of the public that would wish to speak on this motion? Okay, we'll close public comment.
No roll call. It's okay.
You can roll call it. It's that big a deal.
Thank you from staff. Commissioner Sherman?
Yes.
Commissioner Bellheimer?
Yes.
Commissioner Mealy?
Yes.
Commissioner Spradley?
Yes.
Chair Cooley?
Yes, the motion. Motion passes unanimous. One last question here. This would probably be a question for you to start and then the body. Do we want to have discussion about anything concerning a backup or secondary candidate in case something happens and discussion doesn't pan out with our first candidate? Or should we cross that bridge when we get there?
Normally, I recommend you have a second choice. I don't think you're going to have a problem in this case, but...
Tell me you can turn around.
Yeah, tell him he doesn't have to drive to Bel Air.
You probably would want to play second.
Yeah.
He said he hoped he would get that call.
Yeah.
So,
do we know who number 2 was?
Number 2 would be James Gleason. So, do we want to cross that bridge if we get to it and just stick
No, I
with
think
what
we
we
should
have?
be prepared. Not that I think we're going to need it, but
I asked him directly. That exact question.
So did I.
Yeah,
I would recommend you be prepared.
yeah, I think just,
Okay.
Well, we got number 2. so.
Sounds like we have a consensus.
right. Okay, so should we make another motion that we follow that same procedure? Should Mr. Martin not work out, that it would be James Gleason?
I would recommend that.
So
I'll make that motion.
I thought I did. Okay.
Okay. I'll second it then.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. I'll open that up to public comment. Any members of the public wish to speak on that motion? All right, seeing none, we'll close public comment. And all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimous.
Will you please tell Mr. Martin that it was unanimous throughout the dais and the public as well?
Yes, I
Thank
will
you.
be happy to.
Yes, because I think that, you know, that helps with the decision-making process
Oh, yeah.
on his end.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it might have been with the city clerk too, possibly. Maybe. Okay, do we have any other business we need to discuss? And everything is good on your end and we are all buttoned up?
Yep, we're good.
Penny, did you have anything? All right, in that case, I'll look for a motion.
Motion to adjourn? Oh, sorry.
What are you waiting for now till? Go ahead.
Well, because you were talking.
That's a good point.
I want to thank you and your firm for all your hard work and your good information and feedback to us. Made the process lengthy, but I feel better, a lot better this round than I did last round, only because, well, for one, we got to meet him face to face as opposed to video calls during COVID days. But just want to thank you and your firm.
And thank you for all the background material. I really learned a lot more about the candidates. I mean, it killed me to have to read 2,000 pages, but I really learned a lot more from those background pages than the stuff we usually get. So, thank you.
All right.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure working with all of you.
All right, and that, I will look for a motion.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
All right.
Second.
Adjourn.
Awesome.
Run to the car.
See if I can get out there.